You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at KeeleyCompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the two-time national best-selling author of On Fire and In Awe. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, the host of the Live Inspired podcast, and he's the real-life inspiration behind the major motion picture Soul on Fire. Each week, John interviews extraordinary individuals about their life stories so you can more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. You're in for an awesome episode today because we brought on for you a remarkable overcomer, athlete, survivor, fighter, example, and friend. Her name is Scott DeMaria. She's a speaker. She's the author. She's a former University of Notre Dame swimmer whose life changed forever after a tragic team bus crash that not only left her temporarily paralyzed, but also claimed the lives of two of her teammates. This was back in 1992. She joins us today to share the physical and emotional battle to rebuild her life, eventually to reclaim the ability to move again, and then walk again, and then swim again. Today, she reflects on grief, on survivor's guilt, on returning to the pool, and learning how to move forward when life takes an unexpected turn. It's an incredible episode with an amazing human being, my friend. So let me tell you right now, sit up a little bit more straight in your chair, grab your favorite Live Inspired journal and pen. You'll need it for this one. If you or someone you love is walking through disappointment or grief or uncertainty or pain, or maybe you're in a season that feels heavy, maybe even impossible, I think this conversation today is for you. You will leave inspired and ready to jump back in to life. So let me loop her in. She's my friend, now yours. Her name is Scott DeMaria. Haley, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thank you, John. Really a privilege to be here.
You know, so often I wish I had hit record earlier so people could just get a sense for how great our guest is. And today they're in for a treat. You really have a remarkable story, in part, not just because of what you've been through, but because of the heart you have today for living it well. It's a beautiful life that you are authoring forward. For someone you meet randomly in an airport or a swimming pool or a grocery store, if they say, Haley, tell me about you, what would you even respond with?
Oh gosh. Well, first and foremost, I'm a mother and a wife. I think, most people know that family comes first and should come first. But really, I am a woman who is trying to make a difference in this world. I've been given so many gifts, and I'm learning as life goes on how precious that is, how hard life is. And I had so many people help me during my time of need, during my own tragedy, that if I can play a small role in passing that on, that is why I'm here.
Mm. Well, before being a mother and being a wife and being an author and potentially part of a film project and speaker, commencement speaker, on and on and on, you have plenty of things to celebrate. You were a little girl growing up outside of Phoenix, Arizona. What was life like you growing up?
Yeah, exactly. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona a long time ago. It was a small town at the time, but it's hot in Phoenix in the summer. So I learned how to swim really when I learned how to walk. I grew up in a very competitive family. And I say that there are 12 of us cousins on my mom's side. We all played a sport in college. My cousin played in the NBA. My uncle played in the NBA. We have multiple Olympians. It was really an inspiring family to grow up in, kind of a difficult family to grow up in. Sports were expected. Winning was expected. It wasn't always celebrated.
Wow.
So it was not necessarily what would I play a sport? It was what sport would I play? And if you know swimmers, we're not always that coordinated outside of the pool. So I tried all these sports and really wasn't very good at many of them. But swimming was a great gift to me because, I am 5 feet 8 inches today. I have been 5 feet 8 inches since I was 10 years old. That is really challenging for a 10-year-old girl to be that tall. But boy, you put me in the pool and I'm taller than everyone else. I'm halfway down the pool before anyone can catch up to me. And so I started swimming because I really came from this competitive family where I was expected to compete, and swimming was something that I could do. I could do well, gave me a sense of self, a sense of self-confidence. And it was that trajectory that took me to this competitive world of athletics.
Mm. So I have kids right now. The boys are playing soccer, lacrosse,
Mhm.
baseball, and the little girl plays field hockey. And they view training, whether that's in a pool or around a track, as the miserable part that allows them to actually have fun, which usually involves chasing a ball or throwing a ball. I've always been blown away, like swimmers in your case. It's everything you do is work. It's just work. When did you begin to actually enjoy the work of swimming?
So that's really interesting. I learned that from my coaches, and I have had some really great coaches who I've been privileged to swim under. Some of them are really tough. Some of them, you kind of butt heads with sometimes, but they taught me great lessons. And my first coach taught me to love what you do. He wanted us to love swimming. He knew that we would never reach the best of our ability and the pinnacle of our sport if we didn't truly love it.
Right.
And so he wanted us to, and that's really true with anything in life. I learned everything I learned through swimming prepared me for life, and it's so true. If we don't love what we do now, as a mom, as an employee, as a volunteer, you're not going to be able to do it to the best of your ability. I had a coach who really focused on the desire to want to work hard, and I think that is where I found joy. He praised our hard work and our effort and not necessarily the result. And so, as an athlete or really anything we do, it was one thing to show up and put in a hard workout. And, that's an accomplishment in itself, doing the hard work that your coach tells you to. But
Yeah.
it's a totally different experience to show up wanting to do that hard work every day. And I think that's probably the most important lesson I've learned is that desire to want to work hard and to really get satisfaction from that hard work.
Mm.
And then being part of a team is a joy. The outside the pool is where, well, for me was where you really build those relationships and that joy that brings you to practice every day.
So I have a kid right now. He's a sophomore at Indiana. It was a lateral move, meaning he went from St. Louis and then just journeyed down the highway due east and ended up in Bloomington. What attracted a girl from sunny Phoenix, Arizona to northern Indiana for 4 years of college? What was it about that part of the state and what were you pursuing?
Great question. So I always like to share. I went on my recruiting trip to Notre Dame in February of my senior year of high school. This, of course, is 1991, back when athletes were recruited in their senior year and not when they were, in eighth grade. And it's February. So of course, everyone in my family, most who are mostly in Arizona and Southern California, are saying, why would you go to Northern Indiana? It's so far and so cold. Well, I showed up in South Bend again, February, and it was about 60 degrees outside. So I walked around campus thinking, okay, it's cold, but it's not that cold. And I would learn later on that was a little bit of a trick. That's not the norm in Northern Indiana, but I went to swim for my coach, Tim Welsh. I'm the second youngest of those 12 cousins who have played a sport in college. And I knew how important that role of a coach would be. Those 4 years you're in college are really defining years for a young person, and you're away from home and you're not with your parents. And so that coach is going to play a really instrumental, pivotal role in your
Mm.
life. And so I went to swim for Tim. As soon as I met him, I knew he was not necessarily not only the coach I wanted to swim for, but the person I wanted to swim for. And that made it really easy. I wasn't Catholic at the time. I wasn't raised Catholic, so that didn't necessarily play into it. It was really my coach, Tim Walsh.
So I have a son now going off to play baseball in college, and it's so difficult to tell what motivates the coach. So I
Mhm.
don't know what questions to ask, whether the success, the hanging of the banners, is to see their kids, these athletes, elevate and just become the best versions of themselves, or if it's ego and it's elevating and it's brand. And so for you as a young woman leaving Arizona, leaving home, leaving sunshine behind, how do you judge the character of a coach? What questions are you asking, or how do you know that this person's for you, not just for success for them?
So first of all, congratulations to your son. He's in for certainly an experience. But I don't know. It was sometimes you just know when you walk on campus. Sometimes just know when you meet someone. And sports are certainly different these days than they were 30 plus years ago. But I think for me, what spoke to me with Tim was he had a mission statement for Notre Dame swimming that he shared with us from the first day we met him. And he lived it every day for the 29 years he coached at Notre Dame. And that is, the purpose of Notre Dame swimming is to pursue athletic excellence with self-discipline and love for one another. And
Ooh,
those three components, he truly lived every day. He shared that message with us. We heard that mission statement every day. We all still know it again, several decades later. But athletic excellence, of course, we are there to be better athletes. Self-discipline, that's looking at ourselves. Who are we as a person? How are we going to, have that self-discipline to meet the goals that
right.
we want to meet, not only as an individual, as a team. So that personal growth that he was going to help us to develop. And then the love for one another piece, for Tim, that was the most important part of his mission statement. Swimming's an individual sport, but that team aspect of caring for one another and loving one another was really what he wanted for us to build those relationships and friendships, because that's how you succeed, not only in the pool, not only in your sport, but really for the rest of your life.
Mm. Before the accident, which we'll talk about next, how much of your identity was tied to being a swimmer, being an athlete, being a winner?
Oh gosh, everything. Yeah, when you say you're a swimmer, you don't just say you swim, you say I am a swimmer. And swimming gave me everything. It gave me my sense of self, it gave me my sense of self-confidence. It's before school, it's after school, it's weekends, it's my friend group.
Right.
I always half joke, it's the way I smelled. We all have that chlorine smell. I was a swimmer, and again, as we move into the accident in my story, that's one of the hardest things that I know all athletes face when their career is over, is that loss of identity. And I certainly dealt with that as well. And we all have to redefine what that means and find value in ourselves outside of our sport. But uh, for me, swimming was everything.
Well, take us back to that fateful ride from Chicago back to Northern Indiana in 1992.
Yeah, so January 1992, one of the things that I loved about Notre Dame was we had a combined men's and women's team. So Tim Welsh was the coach of the men and the women. And we love the men's team, but we had one meet that year that was women only, and we were really excited about it. It was, again, January of 1992. We swam Northwestern. We lost. We knew we probably would. They had a much stronger program at the time, but we had all swum really well. So coming back from that meet, it was kind of like a girls' night out. We got to pick the movie that we watched on the bus, the VHS tape. We got to, sit on the bus where we wanted to. We didn't have the men's team that we had to worry about. But we were about 2 miles from campus. This is my freshman year, 2 miles from getting back to Notre Dame, when our bus hit a patch of black ice. And that is not a term I had ever heard before, again, coming from Arizona. And our bus literally did a flip turn. So we flipped off the side of the road, and we're facing the opposite direction. So if you're familiar with the sport, if you watched it, our bus did a flip turn off the side of the road. And there's not a whole lot that I remember from that night, but what I remember very clearly. So wanting to get off the bus very quickly, knowing that my back hurt. And thankfully, one of my teammates, I was the second person off the bus, she was the first. She knew that any head, neck, or back injury to not let me move. She'd been trained as a lifeguard, as most swimmers are. So she sat with me and didn't let me move, knowing that my back hurt, for over an hour. It took about an hour and a half for help to arrive. So even though we were just 2 miles from campus, that's how poor weather conditions were that night. Of course, it's 1992. There's no cell phones. So that instant communication didn't happen. I remember when I was first taken from the scene of the accident, again, I'd been laying there for an hour and a half. I was the first one they took away in an ambulance when they put me on the gurney and walked me up the hill back to the toll road was when I first realized I had no feeling or movement from the waist down. And my teammate said to me, Haley, it's okay. Your legs are just numb from the cold. And I believed her. That made perfect sense to me. I was freezing when I was admitted to the hospital. I had a body temperature of about 94 degrees. I was borderline in hypothermic shock. And at that point, again, and one of the few things I remember, there was a doctor who came in and he said, Haley, if you want any chance to walk again, we need to operate tonight. So at 18 years old, in the middle of the night in South Bend, Indiana, legally an adult, but very much a young person, I looked at him and I said, well, what are we waiting for? And signed my own consent form for emergency back surgery in South Bend.
You get the words and the news that you're never going to walk again. That's
Mm-hmm.
the suggested prognosis on your life, this athlete. I mean, your
Right.
identity is not human, woman of faith. It's I'm a winner in the pool. I smell like chlorine. I go out the girl like it's so attached to performance, athletically and movement wise. When you hear that you're not going to be able to move again potentially, what goes through your mind?
Gosh, a lot. Those first 48 hours where, I've now had these two emergency back surgeries. I'm given a 48-hour window for feeling or movement to return if I'm going to walk. That 48 hours goes, passes. And
Right.
and I have a nurse come tell me, Haley, your life has changed. You are not going to walk, you are not going to swim. And the faster you accept this, the faster we can help you live a happy and healthy and meaningful life. And I'm also just learning for the first time that two of my teammates have passed away. And so there's that loss. And it's a lot when you are 18 years old. And I was still in shock and trying to digest all of it. And just even being able to wrap my head around the fact that my legs don't work. And I can feel them with my hands and I can feel the touch on my fingers, but my legs don't feel it. And it's really hard to wrap your head around. And so I was naive, I was in shock, and I was just really determined, especially once I heard of the loss of my teammates, that I would walk and I would swim and I would do it for, again, my teammates Megan and Colleen. And that it was denial, probably, very much so. It was stubbornness. It was just not wanting to face reality. And it took a few more days for me to regain that movement. So it was hard. As an 18-year-old girl, it was devastating to hear. As a mom who has had two 18-year-old children who are older now, I can only imagine it was a lot harder for my parents to hear as well.
Mm. Let's talk about Megan and Colleen for a moment.
Mhm.
In college, I went to St. Louis University, go Billikens. I was in a fraternity my sophomore year. One of our fraternity brothers passed away in a car accident.
Mm.
And it guts you. And at that age, when you're 18, 19, 20, death is unfathomable. Like you can't imagine you ever dying. You are immortal. That's why
Right.
partially we do the things we do. But the idea of one of your good friends, when they're as vibrant as they are, passing away is it's impossible to imagine. And then a couple years later, another one of our brothers
Mhm.
passes away in a car accident. I still am sad by those losses. They weren't teammates. I wasn't people that I was in the pool with or buses with, but they were guys I loved. These are
Mhm.
women that you loved. They're women that you loved. They were women that hours earlier you're in a bus with. What is it like when you find out that these two girlfriends of yours have passed away? What's going through your mind then?
It's the shock of digesting it, and it's the determination that I am going to walk and swim for them because they can't. And I still live my life that way to this day. I live my life in a way that honors them because they didn't have the chance to live this life. There's nothing that I won't do or that keeps holds me back because I know they don't have the opportunity to live this great life. But I will also tell you that for me, the physical healing was so immense. And my injury was so traumatic. And within the first 6 months, I have 5 different back surgeries that were really tough. That it took a
Well, can I
long.
just stop real
Oh,
quick?
sure.
All five of those surgeries were life-threatening. So
Yes.
I know a lot of our listeners have had surgeries, and yes, but these were life-threatening surgeries that could have gone either way. So these are major back surgeries for you.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right, John. And when I do speak and share my story, there's one part and it's the fourth surgery. And if somebody's going to faint, that's always when it happens. And I appreciate you sharing that because I have to be able to share how hard and massive and critical and dangerous these surgeries were, because that makes the recovery as great as it was. And so I
Yes.
appreciate you pointing them out. They were massive and they were life threatening, and there wasn't a guarantee that I would come out of them, of any of them. And because of that, in addition to relearning how to walk, I didn't face any of the emotional healing until I was physically on a path to healing. And again, that took about 6 months for me to even get to a point where I could start healing,
Yeah.
really in a meaningful way physically. And so the loss of my teammates, again, this is my first real experience with death, and I'm trying to wrap my head around it.
Right.
How are they not here anymore? And the loss of my innocence, and I learned at 18 that bad things happened. I learned at 18 that life isn't fair, and I think that's a tough lesson to learn no matter what age you are. There's the loss of my independence, my loss of my normalcy. So all of that loss and emotional healing that many times is harder to recover from than the physical healing, that didn't even begin to start until at least 6 months later. And
That's good.
so Megan and Colleen were my inspiration through the physical journey, and they were my motivation for everything I wanted to do, and again, in so many ways still are. But that loss of really mourning them didn't start till much later, when I was trying to, again, just figure it out.
Yeah.
It's death is complicated, and especially at a young age.
So you've talked sort of about two major struggles, physical and then
Hmm.
emotional. For you,
Hmm.
as you look back on it now, which one was even a greater struggle to wrestle with and endure?
The emotional, for sure. And I think it's because, physically I could see I couldn't walk. Physically I could see my legs weren't working. Physically, what's wrong, you can see it, so you can address it and you can have a plan in place, and then you can see yourself improve. I could see during therapy that I could walk 10 steps, whereas the day before I could only walk 8. And so you can actually see, which then builds momentum to continue to try,
Right.
to reach those goals. The emotional journey is a lot harder. You don't see it. It's harder to recognize. It's harder to put a plan in place. It's unpredictable. It hits you at different times. There are still moments today, again, 34 years later, where something happens or I hear something and I feel it differently and it hits me hard, and so it comes out of the blue, and in many ways it's grief that way. And so I think the emotional journey, when you can't see it and you can't necessarily see yourself improving on
Mm.
a daily basis like I did physically, it's a much more complicated recovery. And they're always both there. There is no one who goes through a physical trauma that doesn't experience the emotional trauma as well.
Early in your recovery, as you're just beginning this pathway forward, you get a visit from President Malloy, a famous leader at Notre
Hmm.
Dame, and he asks a
Hmm.
relatively simple question. He's a Catholic priest. He says, "Can I pray with you?"
Yeah.
What was your response?
So, Monk Malloy Father Malloy played basketball at Notre Dame. So I always say he is a very large, he's tall, large, physically and holy presence. And so, of course, we all know who he is. And he did. He came to visit me, and he very humbly asked, "Can I pray with you?" And I said what most non-Catholics would say, and that is, "But I'm not Catholic." And he said, "That doesn't matter. Can I pray with you?" And, again, at the time, I'm just getting out of the first 2 surgeries that I have. And, of course, I said yes. And he prays with me. And so I don't think I recognized the how momentous that was, what an experience that was for me. I certainly felt it. But really looking back in hindsight, that was the moment that I knew I was going to be okay.
Wow.
It didn't matter that I had only been on campus for 5 months. It didn't matter that I may never swim again. It didn't matter that I may never walk again. I was part of this community. I was part of this team. I was part of this community of faith, even again as a non-Catholic, and they were going to take care of me no matter what my path was. And I've never forgotten that.
Mm.
And it's really powerful in a very tangible way. And I've always been grateful for that. But, again, I don't know how you go through something that we've experienced without that sense of community. And it doesn't just show up when you need it. It's
Right.
there because you give to it when you don't need it. And I think that's one of the greatest ways my life has changed is I want to make sure I always have that in my life, whether it's my church, whether it's my neighborhood, whether it's where I work, whether it is anything that we do. It's a very real way to make sure that we are giving to those when we don't need it so that they're there when we do, because we will all need it at some point.
Hmm. This vibrant, young, athletic, high achieving leader in front of me right now at 18 was locked into a bed for months and
Mhm.
enduring agony and enduring 5 life-changing surgeries and going through the therapy and everything else. Were there moments when the hope began to fade? When you just almost surrendered into despair or no?
So the hard moments for me, not necessarily the physical ones. I hit rock bottom right before that fifth surgery. We had gone into the fourth surgery. It was one of the hardest ones. I came out of it with not great results, and then it had additional complications. I suffered congestive heart failure. My lungs collapsed. I am physically a mess, and I'm scared for the first time because I know I have to go back in and have a fifth surgery.
No.
I don't know if again, I'm in a level 1 trauma center. I'm on a lot of pain medication. I don't know if I actually thought anything besides, I don't know if I can do this anymore. It wasn't, I can't do it. It wasn't, I don't want to do it. I was just very scared. And, but I will say that's when my teammates showed up. That's when Notre Dame showed up. That's when my friends and family from Arizona showed up. And it's anytime that I was down, people were there for me. Again, that's really powerful.
Well, you can
And
share with me a single story. I think for those of us who spent some time in a hospital, we can speak in broad strokes about people
yeah,
and things and
yep.
sometimes prayer but talk about a day specifically when you were at bottom and then the door opens up.
Oh gosh, I have so many. So first, when I'm in the hospital in South Bend and I'm learning to walk, it was not a person, but it was a box, and it was smoking. So you can imagine that literally a smoking box shows up at at the hospital, and they're bringing in security and everything, and they open this box, and it's frozen yogurt packed in dry ice from my favorite yogurt store in Arizona that someone shipped to me overnight. Gestures like that are funny now, of course, but really meaningful. I will tell you in San Diego, which is where I had the 3 surgeries, which were really traumatic. I'm isolated. There's no Caring Bridge page. There's no cell phones where we have this instant communication, and the only way for people to understand or know what's going on is for my mom to leave me, which she rarely did, go down the hallway, get on a payphone, and call someone. And she did that once. She called Missy Comboy, who worked in athletics at the time. She still does. She's retiring this year after 39 years. And she said, Missy, this is bad. We really need help. We need you to pray. And Missy showed up the next day. She flew from Indiana to San Diego and, walked in the room. And just that gesture. My coach
Right.
showed up in San Diego. It is showing up is really powerful. It's one of the things that people are afraid to do. People aren't sure if they're worthy to do it, if you want to see them. And I'm always telling people to go, send that note, send that text message, just show up. My coach, Missy Comboy, that box of frozen yogurt. Again, there's so many stories, and every single one of them makes a huge difference.
I don't even know what kind of frozen yogurt you had or who those 2 people were that visited you, but I'm so moved. And we take for granted now because it's so easy to click on the app, get the ticket. It's already got your information stored in it, and you're about 3 clicks away from being in San Diego. Not a big deal.
Right.
This was a time when like booking air travel honestly was kind of complicated and going
True.
through it, like everything to get out there from Indiana would make you say no. And yet here your friend hops on a flight and go, and here comes your busy coach and he goes. And I just think it's so beautiful. And even the yogurt, that's a complicated thing to do with Amazon right now. 30 years ago, this was very difficult, and one of your friends loved you enough to figure it out and send it your way.
Hmm.
Little things are.
Yes. The little things make the biggest difference. It's so true. And it doesn't take much. Now, flying out and sending frozen yogurt takes a lot, but and the written word, I'm such a huge believer in the power of the written word. I received stacks of mail when I was in the hospital. And when I say a stack, I mean 6 to 8 inches, a stack of mail a day. And some of
Right.
these cards, in South Bend were Haley Scott, Notre Dame swimmer, South Bend, Indiana. And they made their way to me. And I always say, I heard from
You know
everyone I've
you're
ever
big time when they don't even have your address and it shows up
met.
where it's supposed to. I've never received one of those letters, Haley.
Well, South Bend was a small town way back when, and it was a pretty big news story there, as you can imagine. But just taking the time to, the grand gestures of showing up and flying across the country are tremendous. But taking the time to take a pen to paper and write a note and write a letter and let someone know you're thinking of them or praying for them, if that's what you do, that is just as powerful. That someone, especially in this day and age, text messages are great. Again, they're fine. They make a difference too. But taking that time to write something and sending it to someone is something I really believe in, and it
Hmm.
certainly made a huge difference to me.
How would you have defined strength before the bus accident, and how would you define it afterwards?
I would say beforehand, and you probably live in this world too, right? There's before the bus accident, after the accident, and a pretty strong line between the two. Before is, I would say, physical strength, just probably muscle strength,
Right.
and afterwards, it's toughness, it's grit, it's resiliency, it's emotional strength, mental strength. Our minds are so powerful and can do so much, and you don't know that until they're tested.
Mm.
And I would say strength is really that strength, the resiliency, and the mental toughness.
Well, the young girl who was told she would never walk again eventually gets up and moves, and then jogs, and then walks, and then swims. What was it like for you to return to Notre Dame and back into the water?
Ugh, I could not wait. Again, swimmers love the water. It is where I'm at most at home. Love the smell of chlorine. So for me, getting back in the pool, thankfully swimming was more like riding a bike. When I was learning to walk again, I really had to relearn how to walk the way we all do the first time. So rolling and crawling and all of that. Thankfully, swimming, again, I didn't forget how to swim. I was just really out of shape. And so I had to train again for, gosh, probably 8 months before I was in any place to be able to compete
Right.
again. And that day, it was a really big deal, and also just what I should be doing, and very normal. We always joke that it was probably the most people who have ever come to a Notre Dame swim meet, because the stands were packed. And I always say, that's not me. That's the community. That was
Yeah.
the university. That was South Bend. The state trooper who was first on the scene of our bus accident came to watch me swim. My ER doctor came, my therapist was there, teammates, coaches from different sports. They were all there to celebrate this event that they had witnessed over the past 22 months. And so in that sense, it was a really big deal to celebrate something
Right.
positive from a very sad experience and event. And yet for me, getting up on those blocks, it was like any other race, and you go into kind of competition and mode, training and competing mode. And so I love that it was a really big deal, and then it was just me swimming a race.
It was awesome to watch. So when I prepare for podcast, I read everything I can find. I watch everything I can watch, and I listen to all the
Mhm.
podcasts. And watching you race for the first time since the bus accident, for Megan and for Colleen and for those
Mhm.
families, and with Lou Holtz cheering from the corners, and it's
Yeah.
just the whole thing was so inspiring. And yet, I also recognize that when you are a survivor, you wrestle both with gratitude. You're back in the water. You're moving forward again. Thank God. And you also are a survivor, and there's two of your girlfriends who aren't with you anymore. How do you carry that responsibility?
It is a responsibility, and it's a privilege, and life is a privilege. It's something I think about all the time, and actually get asked all the time. Do you wish this accident had never happened? And it's a pretty complicated question to answer, because yes, of course, every day I wish that Megan and Colleen were still here and had the opportunity to live this life that I've been blessed to live. And yet, when I look at my life and everything that is the most meaningful and everything that brings me the most joy and everything that I love, I wouldn't have that had this not happened. And so yes, I wish it hadn't happened. I wish Megan and Colleen were here, and yet I am so grateful for the lessons I've learned, the way I've grown. I am a much more empathetic, deep feeler than I was before, and I'm grateful for that. I have to recognize and just live with kind of that dichotomy every day. I want to honor them with the way I live my life, with also knowing the responsibility of carrying it on.
Hmm. So I also was able to watch a bunch of your speeches, not only commencement addresses, which were fabulous, but I watched this young girl, brunette, I think at the time, in front of a microphone. The football team is lined up arm in arm in front of her, essentially. Lou Holtz is at the end of it. The entire basketball arena is jam packed. I think
Mhm.
Notre Dame's about to take on the number one team in the country. And they put a microphone in your hand. Do you remember that talk? And do you remember what the essence of your message to them was?
Oh, absolutely. So, and let me tell you, I've improved since then. That was it's a little cringeworthy to go back and watch that. So I remember that very clearly. We swam Florida State that night. Notre Dame was playing Florida State the next day in football. It was a really big game, the game of the century at the time. It was the first time College Game Day had gone on the road. They had never left Bristol, Connecticut, but they came to South Bend because number one Florida State was playing number two Notre Dame. And the way to get from the pool to the basketball arena, we always call it go through the bowels of, the athletic complex. And I'm waiting to line up with the football team to go into the arena. And, all the players are talking about this big game and who's our pep rally speaker, and it better be somebody good. This is such a big game. And maybe it's Regis Philbin because he went to Notre Dame, or maybe it's Joe Montana, and all of these names. And I'm really trying to like hide at this point, because
Yes.
it's not Regis Philbin or Joe Montana. And, one of the guys, they look at me, they finally realize I'm there and I'm the only female in this line. And they look at me and I say, it's just me. And, again, I don't know who this player was. I will thank him for the rest of my life. I hope he hears me share this story, because one of the players looks at me and he says, we did get somebody awesome. And I knew if I was, if I was good enough to speak for the players, then I could speak to the, 15,000 people in the arena. But really the essence of my message was, because I just competed, the week before for the first time, and Notre Dame was underdogs in this game. Florida State was projected to win. So I talked about how sometimes, the experts don't always get it right. And they may give you projections, and they may, tell you what they think as the experts. But at Notre Dame, we beat the odds.
Mm. You know you're doing something brilliant as a speaker when you can't even finish the sentence before the audience starts taking over the microphone and filling it with applause. And that's one of the things that moved me so much in your little talk to them that day, as this young woman in front of these big athletes and this big audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is the room was moved and they were different afterwards. It's not the only time you've done this. So you look back on your career now as a mom, as a wife, as a woman, as a speaker, and specifically on that speaking side. Are there stories, one in particular, that you want to share about afterwards you met one person and you recognize, my gosh, if it was only for her or for him, man, I'm glad I traveled and learned how to carry this microphone for that person.
John, I feel that way after every speech. I've learned that it's, in the beginning when I first started speaking, which was around 2008, right after my book came out, I didn't know. I didn't even know if anyone was going to read my book. I didn't know if this was a message worth sharing. And I have learned with every talk I've given that someone that day in the audience needs to hear what I have to say. And I'll be honest with you, there are times when that person is me, where I am speaking and I'm sharing this story and I'm sharing this deep perspective and unique perspective that I've learned. And I think, okay, you know what? I needed to hear this today.
Right.
And, and I've spoken at a number of really interesting events where, I'm invited to speak and it's like, I'm not sure if my message is applicable to, a home remodeling convention or a real estate convention or a finance convention or conference. And what I've learned is that this is a human interest
Right.
story and everyone is struggling with something. And if something is bothering you in your personal life, and it affects your professional life as well. So I might not be speaking to the realtor, but I'm speaking to that person, and they hear that. But it's interesting because I'll oftentimes do a Q&A after I speak, and there have been many times where there have been no questions. And in the beginning, you think, oh my gosh, okay, that must have gone
Yeah.
terribly.
Belly
And then
flopped.
right. And then I realize when people come up to me afterwards to share something, to share their own injury, to share that they were in a car accident, to share that their friend was in a car accident, and what can I do to help them? Those are the moments that I actually find the most meaningful. And what I've recognized is they don't want to share that publicly. They don't want to raise their hand and ask that question or share that comment publicly, but they want to share it with me. The emails that I get after someone has read my book or heard me speak, I've never written to an author. Well, I have since then, but originally I had never written to an author. And it's amazing how many times people reach out and how meaningful that is to me. And of course, I'm going to get back to them. There's a young girl who lives, up in Baltimore. I'm in Maryland, so not too far away. And she is a swimmer and she had a different injury, but a similar recovery. And, we've gone back and forth, and she only had 3 surgeries and I've actually now had a total of 6. And so she wanted to get a tattoo that, 6 is greater than 3. And she shared this with me. And I thought, okay, a tattoo is a little extreme, but her whole thought was, you did this 6 times, I can do it 3 times. And my gosh, what a privilege to be able to make a difference in someone's life like
Mm.
that.
We are have listeners, as you may know, in 50 states and who tune in from 130 countries. It's pretty remarkable. And yet, what you and I were talking about before we hit record is that a lot of folks right now are struggling. There's just a sense of despair that so many folks are dealing with every day of their lives. So, for someone right now in a position, they may not be in a hospital bed, they may not be recovering from a bus crash on the side of a highway with snow falling, but they're just beat down by life. What's some encouragement you might give them today?
Yeah, life is hard, but life is still really good. And I think that's the choice we have every day. I mean, look, I still live with some pretty significant, ramifications from my injuries. I have nerve damage. I have a lot of things that you can't see. And it can be draining, and it can be painful at times. And so I can choose to wake up every morning and focus on that and focus on what's hard and focus on the pain, or I can choose to wake up and know how lucky and blessed I am. And just by waking up every day, we all have something that we can focus on. And I think that's the challenge that we all have, because life is hard. And without it being hard, we won't know how good it is. And so there's always that hope that and that knowledge that life will get better. But it's really that perspective. Again, we all have things we can focus on in the negative, and we all have blessings that we can focus on as well. And they may not be great, but if that's what you're going to focus on, is that one positive thing that morning, that's sometimes what it takes to get through the day.
Hmm. Well, my friend, we have 7 questions we leverage to guide our audience to the finish line, which ends up being the starting line. So they're about to approach the blocks and jump into the pool. The first question, though, for Haley is, what's been the most impactful book you've ever read?
I would have to say To Kill a Mockingbird.
How about
That was
that?
the first book that I read that helped me understand that books are so much more than a story. I've always loved that book.
What's one positive characteristic or one beautiful trait that you possess as a young girl growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, that you wish you had a little bit more of today?
The sense of innocence. you grow up as a young girl and you don't know that life can be hard. And I would like to go back to that for maybe just a few minutes.
If your home caught fire and all living things are out, but you have an opportunity of running back into that home and grabbing one item that really matters to you, what would you grab?
Mm, the Three Amigos picture I have, that's a picture of me and my teammates who passed away. I've had
Wow.
it for by my bedside for 30 some odd years.
Mm. If you could sit on a bench on a beautiful northern Indiana afternoon in the spring and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to be next to?
Oh, that's a really great question. I uh, deceased. I would love to talk to Mary, Jesus's mom. And I always say, whatever you believe, Jesus is who he is or he's not. She was a living person and she watched her son suffer. And I would like to speak to her.
Mm. We've had you can imagine 1,000 interviews, about 1,000 different answers. That's our first Mary, who was on the bench. And I would imagine it would be a fascinating conversation, ultimately ending in her telling you that the answer is yes.
Yes.
The answer to the thing is, yeah, you know, let it be done.
Yes.
What's the best advice that Mary or some coach or a friend or a husband or a child ever gave you? So the best advice, Haley, you've ever received is,
The best advice I have ever received is when you are faced with a decision, when you are faced with really anything, to always make the the right choice at the time and the right decision at the time. And it may not be the right decision in hindsight, but if you always make the right decision at the time, there's no regrets.
mm,
And I've lived that for a long time. Again, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to make the wrong choices, we're going to make the wrong decisions, but if you make the right choice and decision at the time, then you can sleep at night.
mm. What would you tell your 20-year-old self?
Oh gosh. Well, that's a little different than my 18-year-old self because the accident happened when I was 18. And I did go through an exercise where I wrote a letter to my 18-year-old self, which was pretty fascinating. And believe it or not, it did not say, don't get on the bus.
Mm.
But at 20 years old, I was hurting. I was struggling emotionally. Physically, I was on the path to healing, but emotionally, that was really a tough part of the journey. And I would tell myself that not only are you going to be okay, but you're going to have a pretty incredible life.
I think that's a message that 20-year-old needs to hear. And it's a message I think our entire audience from time to time needs to be reminded of. So the
Mhm.
final question for you today is part of the Live Inspired 7 is Haley Scott DeMaria. It has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
Life will not take you down the path that you planned, but it will be an incredible life.
Uh, it has indeed been an incredible life, even if it wasn't the one you imagined at age 17 and 18 when you first got up. So I appreciate you sharing this amazing life journey with us and reminding the rest of us that in spite of the struggles and accidents and tragedies along the way, that the foundation is firm, that God is still there, and that the best is yet to come.
Absolutely.
Haley Scott DeMaria, I appreciate you being with us. So for this time, my friends, and until next time, my name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift. Live with your soul on fire. My friends, one thing that stayed with me from this episode with Haley is how much healing depends upon the people around you. That's right. You can't do it by yourself. You got to lean into your family, into your friends, into your community of faith. Yes, Haley fought incredibly hard to recover. That is true. But over and over and over again, she talked about the friends, the teammates, the family members, the mentors who showed up for her when she needed it most. Sometimes not even knowing that she needed it or she needed them. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do isn't pretending we're fine. It's letting people love us, encourage us, and help carry us through the hardest seasons of life. If you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you, I think you will love my conversation a couple years ago with Olympic legend Dara Torres, a 12-time Olympic medalist. You heard that right. A 12-time Olympic medalist and the first American swimmer to compete in 5 Olympic Games. Dara opens up about perseverance, about overcoming setbacks, about balancing motherhood and competition, and defying expectations at every stage of life. If you want to be inspired by a remarkable story, check it out at episode 380, or cruise with me right now to our website at johnolearyinspires.com/podcast. I'll have in the show notes of this episode with Haley a link into the conversation with Dara. You'll love it. My friends, speaking of loving it, know that I love having you around this community. I'm grateful for your time and your attention and your conviction that the foundation is firm. The headwinds and the struggles we face are, they're real. And yet, in spite of them, the best is yet to come. So for this time, and until next time, my name is John O'Leary. Today is your day. What a gift. Live with your soul on fire.
Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son, Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.